at the National Blood Transfusion Services. Mr. Speaker, it was envisaged to create additional jobs, provide market for manufacturers as well as suppliers, and raise the contribution of real estate and construction sector to GDP. To achieve this, government has been implementing policy and administrative reforms targeted at lowering the cost of construction and improving access to finance for affordable housing. The government has also mobilized resources to support construction of affordable housing units and social housing units. Building on the gains and
na go tigana no gosomo we budget okutura chiko kumanya senchira yobe megekora gense yemo yabono margoba tigaturigerira bono amangana siasa obochori oboke gose nominations igobwaro birgo kolekana chi county anane county ya Nyamirane county ya Kisii ochakera kurwase county ya Kisii chinsemo chinyinge obochori obumboroka netio sembobeti bogo kolekana nigo chinga kechumu nyakirube kya magya ODM makurwase county ya Kisii kerosio ndeke akwanire ngane yungi kya obochori obutakolekana ase rogongo orsana se county ya Kisii kerosio ndeke kiboigo niga amentilebuna ababunge nigo bamutarira omuraiwe kya magya ODM rera moro dinga egentanda akatebire kirira obochori bwemmegosi nominations gotakoleka se county ya Kisii.
Inje kerosio ndeke chama ni ODM ndado confirm exercise yetu ya chikura yanse kujamono na to release the abantu bakire into the polling stations as a kiri contested ntwate abantu mbare bata nkire tzayigo kora nkeigo na give a list of around 13 of them ekile nkoendera kire. I want to confirm a Kisii Central Ward in Kokorabai na Bogotutu Central Gokoratore ya Cheki Gokoratore Virongo na Gokoratore some other areas lakini wajumbe Borowi it is actually confirmed that we are cancelling it and I'm recalling back the people because the party leader Raila Amolo Odinga na arangalia watakuja Nairobi. So they are mnango taona ya Nairobi. Igo mnango kwana gabono gezikia tunyolinga sinini wana maguta tare ngoro lakini kigali cho speech ya wiki wevintu. Igo abantu bano bakiri.
Na goika kogende mbeo gatie biteseni hasobo chori oboboke bwaro bergo kolekana niga bakichukura baikirana ase biteseni ebyo kolende ase barokane kwe murunganeria asogo tatoka kwa masakara yo wakachikura gati ya bakichukura oboigo barabwatane bodi emmo baikirana ase biteseni ebyo asomo chobo songa mune chinse mochinde nigo baganiriye serikali ya nekia magya ODM kwa raso bwagare ekegendreta se kyamekyo ase gangabuna mbamanyete gosobo chori oboboke mboli cho kolekana litukulia lero
nachirega ase getueke ya Kisii primary nje wake kura najita mambega saa 12 kuru saa 12 nacha nyora bante baichire lakini renda bagwa kichikura mbayo one to abutrega igoro chikuru mambi saa 12 kende ngiyo to batebi kundu maitingi kigendrete abande bago chabateba register ya bori robs abande bateba yetueke nkiafu ekefungire ngeli ngetakerwa kiruchikurororo one to stranded into maitinga ngaitokoru ngaitogochi nduma ideo yogotebi ngangi tutakere gokora.
Mimi napiga kura hapa Kisii primary ward tangu tuliamka saa 11 baada saa hii hatujaletewa vyombo vya kupiga kura, na hii ndio ward kubwa vile mnaelewa kwa Kisii Nyaribari Chache constituency. Kisii Central Ward ndio kubwa na Kisii primary ndio iko na watu wengi wa wapiga kura. Sasa sisi tunashangaa nini inaendelea.
Mimi ni mkaaji wa hapa na ni mpiga kura wa Gusii Stadium. Kutoka asubuhi tumekuja hapa tulikuwa tunataka kupiga kura, nimeamka saa 12 nimekuja hapa kupiga kura nimchague mtu ambaye ninapenda. Kitu cha kushangaza ni kuwa wakati tumefika tumekaa saa hizi ni saa 6:30 hakuna lolote ambalo linaendelea. Kuna aspirants wengine ambao wanakuja hapa kwetu, wanakuja hapa wanasimama wanaambia watu waende nyumbani. Ati hakuna kura. Sasa wakati aspirant anasimama anakuja anaambia watu waende nyumbani, Kazi ya aspirant ni kukaa nyumbani angoje kura. Sisi kama wananchi ndio tuko na tuamue ni nani.
Yale tumesikia hii polling station mbili ya Nyaura na Kisii Primary ati kuna mahali watu wanaendelea kupiga kura, sijui wamepata boxes hizo wapi. Sasa ndio nataka ufanye hiyo investigation. Kama hiyo ni rumor, lakini kitu mimi nakuomba tupatie hizo polling station mbili watu waende wapige kura. Kama hakuna, kwa hivyo nataka utuambie ni kwa nini ilitolewa.
Na boigo ase bunge ya bumachoge chache ni goboigo utako chikuro kwene kiwasense meyo maiga ya bakichukura kwikirana sebiteseni ase konyora beru biri gochia waka chikura sogochora bali baguchikwiruke bandera ya ODM ase birugo aho kolengana menyi bense meyo ni goba tebiruna yabaika sebiteseni ebyo na konyora nigo bisiekire.
Asama dida ngoro kugilba chobure igonde a registered voter asege to ever kuyonge primary school asere to wento kutwara nominations cha ODM njetima nyetika ngomenyeta Nairobi lakini asenge nje shughuli ilibidi ni travel asenge nje uongozi borogobe only to find that hakuna elections, hakuna nominations zilikuwa zinaendelea aba mintomba cha mambi tuaba banda bangi twaganyalende ballot boxes tukole only to find that hakuna hizo. Mimi nimesema stoki hapa na nditi niko rugai hapa kando lenga ama ene nomination isingo korukire
bono ingeno marieta anengoro kujemisi otuori changa egetuo kia nenga kero polling center igo tuaja twaga chikura kya muchucho ODM twanyora kure ekyo nchiyo kya tantanire twasinyirwa se chiagenda igo ntura akakura etoganyete chikura chiche twake muchucho toisane ka seme nkoro ya ito ngantu akachikura osebana bana igo ntubone twakumirie kara abantu bari birogo togote bunga chikura mbakora ntumatingi bachikorete mechi yabo twatagete chikura chiake ruga ase polling center ali ase getuo twarenge toisane ka mane ntwabu chikura nchiaku chenu osebana bantu
na boigo tigara samangana halengeta mangana yobo chole na se kemagia ODM motomulekera se county ya Nyamira boigo bochoria sense meyumbo kolegeti asa bwata ni ODM na boigo bali bakorigie birugo ao barokana kwe murunganiria enchire kemagia ODM kagendrete kuira emerobeli yaye ase county yo ya Nyamira oyomo borio korigie kirokyo bwe msieda malisi muoni kurwa se county ya Nyamira ane kurwa se ward ya township ni gamo chirie enchire kemagia ODM gekira ni umurobeli tukoria lero egento na nabo arorega komochia Ndezi Ikomi.
Kwa majina mimi naitwa Mheshimiwa Damalisi Muni. I belong to Township Ward. Leo ni siku tulikuwa na nominations, but indeed I don't know what happened. We were told by the commissioners yesterday, where we were in one of the hotels in Nyamira, that today we have nominations. In the morning when I waked up, I went to the polling stations. I found only security men with the people who came to vote, but there was nobody from the party. There was no official who came to conduct the elections. So from there, I am wondering what is happening. By the way,
Wanjo muligereria hayungati yali atogende to kwaliganiria anandeni gara senchera yobwenge gekoragensemo yabono margoba seri bonto gosansa murandire na gokomanya inyirabono ekyama kerekia maendeleo chap kwikora wono mugavana we county ya Machakos Alfred Mutua nigo bagendete kobekese yo kuigwa na sogo moboli bwa Kenya kwanza nigerusiro bwa azimio la umoja ayomo naenda mange gekoraga ensemo yabono maroni komana go musacho yomo ni ganyare kumuito murugyoye goika gukwa na abana baye batatu musacho nigibyeke kobroika segete sene kyabanyanyimbo ayonsi ekoragense mo yabono margoba incho kumenya senchira yobo ikirano mbiye mona sogo chara gotengera Ndizi TV obonsubu mugusito bwati wetira sensemo yemtendao nsemo ya Facebook Ndizi TV News na baigensemeli ya YouTube na bogotonyara buna Ndizi TV News retirane nkruko Vincent Onyancha.
shilling 62.9 billion will cater for transmission and distribution of power. Kenya shilling 18.5 billion for development of geothermal energy. Kenya shilling 9.3 billion for electrification of public facilities, and Kenya shilling 2 billion for development of nuclear energy as well as exploration. Mr. Speaker, the security of our nation remains paramount and must be maintained to safeguard the considerable development gains. For this reason, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 317.8 billion to support operations of the National Police Service, Defense, and the National Intelligence Services. Mr. Speaker, the proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 128.4 billion for defense, Kenya shilling 46.4 billion for the National Intelligence Service, and Kenya shilling 122.2 billion for police and prison service, Kenya shilling 10.7 billion for leasing of police motor vehicles, and Kenya shilling 1 billion for police modernization program, Kenya shilling 1 billion for the National Communication and Surveillance System, and Kenya shilling 335 million for the equipment of the National Forensic Laboratory. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 4.8 billion for medical insurance for the National Police Service and prisons, Kenya shilling 2.3 billion for the group personal insurance for the National Police Service and prisons, as well as Kenya shilling 1 billion for the National Integrated Identity Management System. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to provide access to quality education for our children and youth. This will indeed facilitate realization of their full potential and enable them effectively contribute to the development of the country. The allocation and efficiency in spending on education has been increased to improve outcomes. As a result, access to education at all levels has improved remarkably, as evidenced by the increased enrollment in the basic and tertiary institutions. To further improve education outcomes, I propose a total of Kenya shilling 544.4 billion to support programs in the education sector. Mr. Speaker, out of the proposed allocation, Kenya shilling 12 billion will cater for free primary education, Kenya shilling 2.5 billion for recruitment of teachers, Kenya shilling 64.4 billion for free day secondary school education, including insurance under the NHI for secondary school students, Kenya shilling 5 billion for examination fees waiver for grade 6, class 8, and Form 4 candidates, and Kenya shilling 1.96 billion for the school feeding program. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for training of teachers on competency-based curriculum, and Kenya shilling 310 million for the digital literacy program and ICT integration in our secondary schools. Mr. Speaker, to support transition from primary education to junior secondary school education under the competency-based curriculum, Kenya shilling 4 billion has been set aside for the construction of classrooms to support school infrastructure development and ensure safe learning in our schools. I have proposed allocation of 2.8 billion for primary and secondary schools infrastructure, and Kenya shilling 1.8 billion for construction and equipping of technical training institutes and vocational training centers. Further, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion has been set aside to increase access and improve the quality of technical and vocational education and training programs under the East African Skill Transformation and Regional Integration Project. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations in the education sector includes Kenya shilling 294.7 billion to Teachers Service Commission, Kenya shilling 91.2 billion for university education, Kenya shilling 15.8 billion to the Higher Education Loans Board, Kenya shilling 6.8 billion for Kenya Secondary School Education Quality Improvement Project, and Kenya shilling 5.2 billion capitation for TVET students. Further, Kenya shilling 527 million has been set aside for technical vocational education, training, and entrepreneurship. Kenya shilling 971 million for promotion of youth employment and vocational training, and Kenya shilling 323 million for the National Research Fund. Mr. Speaker, unleashing the productive potential of people living in poverty involves the removal of constraints through economic inclusion programs. In this respect, the government continues to support vulnerable groups through the Social Safety Net program. famously referred to as Inua Jamii. To continue protecting this vulnerable segment, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 39.5 billion for social protection and affirmative actions in this budget. Mr. Speaker, out of this allocation, Kenya shilling 17.5 billion will cater for cash transfers to elderly persons, Kenya shilling 7.9 billion for orphans and vulnerable children, and Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for persons living with severe disabilities. Mr. Speaker, the proposed allocation also includes Kenya shilling 5.1 billion for the Kenya Hunger Safety Net Program, Kenya shilling 500 million for the National Drought Emergency Fund, Kenya shilling 2.6 billion for the Kenya Development Response to Displacement Impact Project, and Kenya shilling 2.8 billion for the Kenya Social and Economic Inclusion Project. In addition, Kenya shilling 933.8 million will go to the Child Welfare Society of Kenya, and Kenya shilling 400 million for the Presidential Bursary for the Orphans, and Kenya shilling 459 million for the National Development Fund for persons living with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, we acknowledge and support the critical role that youth and women play in nation building. The need for full and equal participation of youth and women across all spheres of the economy needs to be accelerated and sustained. To further empower the youth and support business owned by the youth, women and persons living with disabilities, I have recommended Kenya shilling 13.1 billion for the National Youth Service, Kenya shilling 2.2 billion for the Kenya Youth Empowerment and Opportunities Project, Kenya shilling 175 million for the Youth Enterprise Fund, Development Fund, Kenya shilling 170 million for the Women Enterprise Fund, and Kenya shilling 92 million for the Youth Empowerment and Enterprise Fund. Mr. Speaker, to promote regional equity, reduce poverty, and enhance social development, I have proposed Kenya shilling 44.3 billion for the National Government Constituency Development Fund, Kenya shilling 2.1 billion for the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, as well as Kenya shilling 7.1 billion for the Equalization Fund to finance programs in the previously marginalized areas. Mr. Speaker, we recognize the great opportunities that digital technologies offer in various sectors of the economy. Efficiently deployed, digital technologies have strong potential to accelerate economic recovery and improve livelihoods at relatively low cost for sustainable and inclusive development. For this reason, we have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 15.6 billion to fund initiatives in the information, communication, and technology sector. Specifically, this allocation includes Kenya shilling 620 million for government shared services. Mr. Speaker, the government is investing in the development of the Konza National Data Center and Smart City facilities. This National Data Center was commissioned in July 2021 and is currently hosting client services, including government agencies, and is a platform for the acceleration of innovation, particularly among the youth in Kenya. We encourage all MDAs to take advantage of this modern facility. Mr. Speaker, to fast-track the development of the Konza Technopolis City, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 5.2 billion, 3.8 billion for Konza Data Center and Smart City facilities. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 2.7 billion for maintenance and rehabilitation of last-mile connectivity network, Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for maintenance and rehabilitation of the National Optic Fiber Backbone Phase 2 expansion cable, and Kenya shilling 1.4 billion for installation and commissioning of Eldoret-Nadapal fiber optic cable. Mr. Speaker, to further support sports development and tourism recovery, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 15.8 billion for the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund, Kenya shilling 3.2 billion for the Tourism Fund, Kenya shilling 1.8 billion for Tourism Promotion Fund, and Kenya shilling 125 million for refurbishment of the regional stadium. Mr. Speaker, environmental protection and access to adequate supply of clean water is fundamental for the achievement of the socio-economic development envisioned by the Kenya Vision 2030. To expand access to clean and adequate water for domestic and agricultural use, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 45.9 billion for water and sewerage infrastructure development, Kenya shilling 16 billion for water resource management, and Kenya shilling 9.8 billion for water storage and flood control. In addition, I have set aside Kenya shilling 8.5 billion for irrigation and land reclamation and Kenya shilling 2.1 billion for water harvesting and storage for irrigation. Mr. Speaker, in order to support environment and water conservation, I propose to set aside Kenya shilling 10.2 billion for forest and water towers conservation, Kenya shilling 3.1 billion for environment management and protection, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for meteorological services, and Kenya shilling 7 billion for wildlife conservation and management. Mr. Speaker, stronger institutions and effective policy implementation and management of resource improve service delivery, transparency, and accountability. We shall continue to seek better public service delivery by building and sustaining strong, efficient, and accountable institutions. In order to enhance good governance and scale up our fight against corruption, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 3.6 billion for the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Kenya shilling 3.4 billion for the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, Kenya shilling 8.4 billion for the Criminal Investigation Department Services, and Kenya shilling 6.4 billion for the Office of the Auditor General. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, to enhance the oversight and legislative role of Parliament and access to justice, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 50.2 billion to Parliament and Kenya shilling 18.9 billion to the judiciary. Mr. Speaker, in order to facilitate the 2022 general elections, we allocated Kenya shilling 22.9 billion in the current financial year 2021-2022, and I further propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 21.7 billion in the financial year 2022-2023 to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Mr. Speaker, the county governments will receive a proposed allocation of Kenya shilling 370 billion as equitable share in the financial year 2022-2023. This represents 27.3% of the most recent audited and approved revenue raised nationally. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the equitable share of revenue raised nationally, the county governments will receive recommended conditional allocations amounting to Kenya shilling 37.1 billion, bringing the total allocation of the county governments in the financial year 2022-2023 to Kenya shilling 407 billion. Mr. Speaker, we have also complied with the High Court ruling on conditional grants to county government. In this regard, conditional grants have now been excluded from the Division of Revenue Bill 2022, unlike in the case of last financial year. I note with appreciation that this House has unlocked the stalemate on the county government's grant bills. This bill will provide a legal framework for transferring conditional grants to the county government, transfer of functions between national county government. Mr. Speaker, in order to ensure that the process of transfer of functions between the national and county government is clearly provided for in law, we are developing a legislation to operationalize Article 187 and 189 of the Constitution on transfer of functions and cooperation between the national and the county governments. The proposed legislative framework will provide transparency in the administration of intergovernmental transfers in respect of transferred functions and cooperation between government. Once completed, the legislative proposal will be submitted to this Honorable House for consideration and approval. Mr. Speaker, in order to support county governments' efforts to enhance their own source revenue, the National Treasury has submitted the county government bill, revenue raising process bill, to this August House. The bill will regulate the manner in which counties introduce or vary fees and charges. Once passed, this legislation will address the problem of multiplicity of fees and charges within and across counties, in line with Article 209, subsection 5 of the Constitution. I call upon honorable members to consider and approve this bill in a bid to create a conducive environment for business and deal with the issue of multiplicity of fees and charges within the county government. Mr. Speaker, in order to support an implementation of the county government's own source revenue policy, the National Treasury is in collaboration with the Ministry of Land and Fiscal Planning, County Council of Governors, and other stakeholders have developed the National Rating Bill 2022 to replace the outdated Valuation for Rating Act, CAP 266 and CAP 267. This bill was submitted to this Parliament in January 2022, and once enacted will guide valuation for rating and imposition of rates on rateable property. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has a wealth of mineral deposits. From the financial year 2016-17 and 2019-20, the government collected a total of $5.5 billion in royalties from extractive activities. These amounts translate to an average of $1.4 billion annually. Although mineral royalties are currently being received from 15 counties, 91% of the payments are derived from extractive activities in only 3 counties, namely Kilifi, Kwale, and Kajiado. Mr. Speaker, following a presidential directive, the National Treasury has since developed a draft framework which provides for mechanisms for sharing of revenue from mineral royalties among the national government, county governments, and communities in line with Section 183 of the Mining Act 2016. The framework, which is currently being subjected to the stakeholder consultation, will provide basis for ensuring that revenues raised from the mineral royalties trickle down to the county government and communities where mining is taking place. Mr. Speaker, in line with Article 204, subsection 1 of the Constitution of Kenya, county governments have been allocated Kenya shillings 7.1 billion under the Equalization Fund in the financial year 2022-23, which represents 0.55% of the most recent audited accounts of revenue received. Mr. Speaker, following the High Court ruling on the petition number 272 of 2016 of 5th November 2019, quashing the guidelines of administration of Equalization Fund and ensuing disbandment of the Fund's Advisory Board, all expenditures of the fund were stopped. To mitigate this, Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury, in collaboration with other stakeholders, developed the PFM regulations 2021, which was approved by Parliament in October 2021. Mr. Speaker, following the appointment of the Advisory Board and establishment of the Secretariat, it is expected that completion of projects as identified under the first policy and the implementation of the programs in the second and subsequent policies will now be fast-tracked. Mr. Speaker, continued delays in payment of pending bills to entities that provide goods and services to both national and county government have affected liquidity and operation of these entities. In a number of cases, this has led to closure of businesses, affecting livelihoods of the suppliers. Though some progress was noted in the settlement of these pending bills by the national county government, we still have challenges where a number of suppliers are owed large amounts of money. In this regard, I direct government ministries, departments and agencies, as well as the county governments, to clear all their pending bills by 30th June 2022. In addition, we call upon all the MDAs and county governments to avoid accumulation of pending bills and ensure that payments are made as and when due. Mr. Speaker, I now want to highlight the tax policy measures for the financial 2022-23 budget, which are contained in the Finance Bill 2022. I will also highlight custom measures that Kenya will be presenting for consideration by the East African Community Ministers responsible for finance and economic affairs in their pre-budget consultation plan for May this year. These custom measures will become effective from 1st July 2022. Mr. Speaker, the proposed measures contained in the Finance Bill 2022 are expected to generate an additional $50.4 billion to the exchequer for the financial 2022-2023 budget. Mr. Speaker, as earlier indicated in this statement, we consulted other partner states in the East African community, and Kenya was allowed to present its budget statement earlier than the other partner states. With regards to customs measures, we have evaluated various proposals that we intend to submit for consideration during the East African Community pre-budget consultation by the EAC Ministers for Finance, which will be held later in May this year. The measures that will be agreed upon will be communicated through the ESC Gazette and implemented from 1st July this year. Mr. Speaker, these measures are generally meant to promote our manufacturing sector and enhance our exports by making inputs and raw materials used in the manufacture of goods more affordable, hence lowering the cost of production. In addition, some of the measures are aimed at enhancing the competitiveness of locally manufactured goods through protection from unfair competition by imported goods. Some of the custom measures are also geared towards protecting of critical sectors of our economy, like agriculture, from unfair competition occasioned by importation of products that can be produced by our gallant farmers. In cases where local production does not meet our demand, the government will ensure the deficit is met in an orderly manner that does not adversely affect our farmers. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the proposed amendments under the Value-Added Tax Act. The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing socioeconomic implications on Kenyans continue to impose a heavy burden on our health sector. In this regard, I have proposed more incentives to the sector by exempting from VAT plant and machinery for use by manufacturers of pharmaceutical products. Mr. Speaker, the government has been progressively addressing the cost of healthcare in the country so as to expand access to quality and affordable healthcare services. To further reduce the healthcare costs, I propose to exempt from VAT medical oxygen supplied to registered hospitals, urine bags, adult diapers, artificial breasts, and colostomy or ileostomy bags for medical use. Mr. Speaker, assembly of motor vehicles and manufacture of motor vehicle parts locally has gained traction. In order to encourage more investment, especially in the manufacture of passenger motor vehicles locally, I propose to exempt from VAT inputs and raw materials used in the manufacture of passenger motor vehicles. Additionally, I propose to exempt locally manufactured passenger motor vehicles from VAT. Mr. Speaker, charitable organizations play an important role of supporting the vulnerable members of the society. Currently, entities that make cash donations to charitable organizations that are registered under either the Societies Act or the Non-Governmental Organization Coordination Act are allowed to deduct the cash donations from their taxable income. However, entities that donate cash to charitable organizations that are not registered under the two acts are not allowed to deduct such donations from their taxable income. To address this challenge, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to allow all entities that donate cash to charitable organizations to deduct the donations from their taxable income. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has witnessed significant growth in the use of financial derivatives, including hedging, futures, and options. However, there is no provision in the Income Tax Act to charge the gains accruing from the financial derivatives to non-residents. To ensure equity and fairness, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to provide for the taxation of gains accruing to the non-residents for the transaction involving financial derivatives in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, last year, the Income Tax Act was amended to replace the previously thin capitation rule for determining taxable income with a method that restricts interest based on a ratio of earning before interest, taxes, depreciation, and harmonization. In the amendment, microfinance institutions licensed under the Microfinance Act were omitted in the exclusion list of the application for the new rule. In this regard, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to exclude microfinance institutions licensed under the Microfinance Act from the interest restrictions based on a ratio of earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization in determination of their taxable income. Mr. Speaker, next I will highlight the proposed amendment under the Excise Duty Act. The Act provides for annual inflation adjustments of the specific duty rates on all products. However, It has been observed that the adjustment may not always be appropriate for some products, depending on the economic and social environment facing these products at that time. To address this, I propose to empower the Commissioner General of KRA to exclude from inflation adjustment such products after consideration of the prevailing economic circumstances facing them. Mr. Speaker, last year, the Excise Duty Act was amended to introduce excise duty on all imported eggs. This was meant to protect local producers of eggs. However, we have noted that the tax has adversely affected the hatching business, as there is insufficient local capacity to supply all the required eggs for hatching. To address this situation, I propose to exempt from excise duty eggs from hatching imported by licensed hatcheries upon recommendation by the responsible Cabinet Secretary. Mr. Speaker, neutral spirit is an input for manufacture of pharmaceutical products. Manufacturers of pharmaceutical products, which are not subject to excise duty, are entitled to a refund of the excise duty paid on the raw materials or inputs. The processing of such refunds takes time, hence creating cash flow challenges. To address this concern, I propose to exempt neutral spirit used by the registered pharmaceutical manufacturers upon approval of the Commissioner General of KRA from excise duty. Mr. Speaker, currently, locally assembled motor vehicles are exempt from excise duty. In order to ensure the same treatment for manufactured passenger motor vehicles, I propose to exempt from excise duty locally manufactured passenger motor vehicles. This is aimed at encouraging investment in this sector and enhancing competitiveness of locally manufactured passenger motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, gambling, gaming, and alcohol addiction have become prevalent in our society. These habits are extremely addictive and can result in a variety of harmful repercussions, especially to the youth. Advertisements for alcoholic beverages, betting, and gaming contribute greatly to the promotion of these habits. To discourage the promotion of these products and activities, I propose to introduce excise duty of 15% on fees charged by all television stations, print media, billboards, and radio stations for advertisements of these activities. Mr. Speaker, in the recent years, innovations in the tobacco industry have led to the introduction of new products beyond e-cigarettes. These products continue to negatively affect the health of our citizens. The design of these products and the taxation regime makes them easily accessible to users, including the school children and the youth, thus leading to nicotine addiction and consequently smoking and use of other drugs. In order to prevent these habits and make the liquid nicotine used in these devices less accessible to users, including the school children and the youth, I propose to change the taxation regime for liquid nicotine from current shilling per unit to an excise duty of current shilling 70 per milliliter. Mr. Speaker, in the bill, I have also proposed to increase the specific rates of excise duty for a number of products by 10% to generate additional revenue for the government. Given the recent global increase in oil prices, I have excluded petroleum products from this increase. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the proposed amendments under the Miscellaneous Fees and Levies Act. In order to promote manufacturing of pharmaceutical products, I propose to exempt inputs and raw materials imported by manufacturers of pharmaceutical products from payment of import declaration fees and railway development levy. This will encourage investments in the health sector and improve access to affordable healthcare services. Mr. Speaker, in order to support farmers who rear cows as well as pastoralist communities who depend on sale of hides and skin, I propose to reduce the export levy on the raw hides and skin from 80% or US dollars 0.5 per kilogram to 50 cents or US dollar 0.32 per kilogram. Mr. Speaker, on the amendments to enhance tax administration procedures, government agencies are expected to be sensitive and responsive to emerging customer needs. In this respect, the Kenya Revenue Authority has been on a journey of transformation to enhance customer-centric service delivery. In order to align the operation of the authorities with emerging trend, I propose to amend the Kenya Revenue Authority Act to change the name of the authority from Kenya Revenue Authority to Kenya Revenue Service. The change of the name is intended to rebrand the authority and transform its public image, thus enhance tax compliance through improved public relations and maintain a clear focus on taxpayers' needs. I have also proposed consequential amendments to other statutes which make reference to the name Kenya Revenue Authority and align them to the proposed new name. Mr. Speaker, we have noted that tax disputes take too long to conclude, especially after judgments by the Tax Appeals Tribunal. In order to protect the disputed tax revenue, I propose to amend the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act 2013 to require a deposit of 50% of the disputed tax revenue in a special account at the Central Bank of Kenya when the tribunal makes a ruling in favor of the Commissioner General of KRA, as the taxpayer proceeds to appeal the decision. I have also proposed that in case the taxpayer receives judgment in his or her favor on final determination of the matter, the 50% deposit shall be refunded to the taxpayer within 30 days after the final determination of the matter by the courts. Mr. Speaker, the Tax Procedure Act empowers the Commissioner General, KRA, to issue directions to the land registrar to put a caveat on land or restriction on the transaction for taxpayers with tax arrears. It is noted that the taxpayer may have other assets other than land which the Commissioner can put caveat or restriction on transfer to secure unpaid tax revenue. In this respect, I propose to amend the Tax Procedure Act to require registrars of ships, aircrafts, motor vehicles, and any other properties that may be used as security for unpaid taxes to restrict the disposal or transaction of these assets upon receipt of direction from the Commissioner. Mr. Speaker, the Tax Procedures Act empowers the Commissioner General KRA to request for additional information from the taxpayers in order to facilitate determination of an objection on assessment tax. The Act does not specify the number of times that the Commissioner can request for such information on a particular case. This prolongs the determination of tax disputes, as additional information can be requested severally, and any request for additional information provides the Commissioner with additional 60 days to make a decision. In order to address this gap, I propose to amend the Act to require the Commissioner to issue a decision on objection by taxpayer within one cycle of 60 days from the date of receiving a valid objection by a taxpayer. Mr. Speaker, Kenya ratified and deposited the Multilateral Convention for Mutually Administrative Service Assistance in the tax matter with the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information on Tax Matters in July 2020. Under this convention, Kenya is expected to exchange information on tax matters with tax jurisdictions that are members of the forum. In order to promote greater tax transparency among multinational enterprises, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to require that multilateral enterprises which have been operational in Kenya to report the activities within Kenya and in other jurisdictions to the Commissioner General of Kenya Revenue Authority. Mr. Speaker, the Statutory Instrument Act that became effective in 2013 provides for automatic expiry of the statutory instrument after 10 years from the date of their publication. In this respect, there are several tax-related regulations issued in accordance with the Act, as well as some that were issued prior to the enactment of the Act that will expire after the 10-year period. The expiry of these instruments will negatively affect tax administration and revenue collection. In this regard, I propose to amend the Statutory Instrument Act to exempt the tax-related regulations under the various tax laws from automatic expiry provided under the Act. Mr. Speaker, this administration has implemented socio-economic transformative programs and a devolved system of government that required enormous financial resources. At the same time, the country was confronted by some degree of security challenges, the twin global challenges of COVID-19 pandemic and climate change, and the desert locust invasion that impacted on food security. In the midst of all this, Mr. Speaker, the government has successfully maintained macroeconomic stability, achieved growth rates above that of sub-Saharan African region, and improved welfare of Kenyans. In conclusion, therefore, Mr. Speaker, our sustained investments since 2013 have significantly transformed our economy and strengthened our resilience. Encouraged by this, our economy has bounced back, giving our people incredible optimism, even in the situation of extreme challenges. Mr. Speaker, we are proud of our socio-economic achievements and seek to sustain high economic growth so as to improve the welfare of our people. Considering the envisaged development agenda and the limited fiscal space, we have carefully balanced the difficult choices in resource allocation in order to finance the highest priorities that will propel this country to a greater heights of prosperity. I am confident that we have made the right decisions that will accelerate the pace of our economic growth. At this point, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank His Excellency the President, Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta, for his leadership and guidance, which has transformed this country into a regional economic hub. I also thank my fellow cabinet secretaries, the respective principal secretaries, and various accounting officers and staff in all government, ministries, departments, and agencies for their support and contribution to the financial year 2022-2023 budget. Mr. Speaker, I also express gratitude to Kenyans for their rich and diverse contributions, proposals, and suggestions that help us to finalize this budget. My appreciation goes to first to you, Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, and your counterpart in Senate, the majority and minority leaders, and the entire House leadership, including the respective clerks, for overseeing the approval process of the budget estimates for the financial 2022-23 and the related document. Second, to the honorable members of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, the Finance and Budget Planning Committee, and all other departmental committees of this House, as well as the staff of Parliamentary Budget Office, for their constructive inputs during the approval process of the budget. Third, I recognize and appreciate the management and staff of the National Treasury who have worked tirelessly for long hours to ensure that this budget and supporting documents were prepared within new timelines to enable the presentation of this budget in April, thus paving way for the August general election. Fourth, the Kenya Revenue Authority, Central Bank of Kenya, Attorney General's Office, Commission on Revenue Allocation, financial sector regulators, and the various agencies under the National Treasury and the planning for their contribution and advice during the budget process. Fifth, my gratitude goes to our multilateral and bilateral development partners for their continued technical and financial support. Further, I thank the private sector for their sustained contribution to the growth of our economy. And sixth, I wish to appreciate the media and the non-state actors for the active engagement and participation in the financial 2022-2023 budget process. Mr. Speaker, allow me to once again thank all honorable members of the National Assembly and the Senate for their support in facilitating legislative proposals supporting the government economic transformation agenda over the last 10 years. At this juncture, I wish honorable members the very best as they seek to renew their mandates with their electorates during the upcoming general election. My hope is that the electionary period will not distract us from our pursuit to solidify and sustain the economic growth trajectory we have realized over the years. Lastly, and not least, Mr. Speaker, I remain immensely grateful to my family for their love, understanding, regular encouragement, and above all, their unfailing support as I stare my demanding duties at the National Treasury and Planning since my appointment to the docket. I thank you all, and may God bless you. The very last, Mr. Speaker, before I resume my seat, you recall that I have already submitted to this House the budget estimates and the Finance Bill 2022, together with accompanying documents as required by the Public Finance Management Act 2012. Today, I further submit the following documents to this August House and request that you gracefully receive them. Honorable Speaker, the documents include the budget statement of the financial year 2022-2023, the Budget Policy Statement 2022, estimates of revenue, grants and loans for the financial year 2022-2023 budget, financial statement for the year 2022-2023 budget, medium-term debt management strategy 2022, sixth, budget highlights, the Mwananchi Guide for the financial year 2022-2023, and lastly, the statistical annex to the budget statement for the financial year 2022-2023. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.